Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of our Wilson Institute Speaker Series, Self-Isolation Edition. I cannot believe it's been 4 months already. I hope you're all well. A few updates. We're now in phase 2 of reopening in Ontario, which leads to an important question. Should I get a haircut or let it grow, acting as a historical record for the length of this pandemic? Let's put it to a vote. Today, and for the remainder of the summer months, I thought we'd try something a little different. I thought it'd be interesting to catch up with former Wilson Institute fellows and to see what they've been up to and, how they've been coping with quarantine and the current state of things. It's my pleasure today to welcome Katie Rollwagen, someone I've known for many years since our time as graduate students at the University of Ottawa. Katie is currently a professor of history at Vancouver Island University, and in 2013-2014, she was a visiting assistant professor here at the Wilson Institute. It's my immense pleasure to catch up with Katie today and talk about everything from our kids to her current projects to Generation Z leading the charge against climate change, racism, sexism, etc. And now, without further ado, let's go. Hey Katie, it's wonderful to see you again. I know it's been years since the time we spent together at the Wilson Institute, and also as young, wide-eyed PhD students at the University of Ottawa. So how have you been, despite everything that's happening outside and...
First, thanks, Max. It's really nice to see you, and thanks for inviting me. And I've been really good. I teach not in my spare room. Normally, I teach in a classroom. I'm a professor of history at Vancouver Island University here in Nanaimo, British Columbia, on Vancouver Island. And life on Vancouver Island is pretty much as awesome as everyone says it is. So I'm pretty happy with that. Even in the midst of a pandemic, it's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I'm assuming the air is probably a little bit fresher in Vancouver Island than it is here in what is today a muggy, steamy, and not particularly nice smelling Hamilton.
I miss Hamilton. Well, maybe not Hamilton so much. I mean, I grew up in the GTA. I grew up in Milton, so I do miss that mugginess as much as it is not all that pleasant.
Hamilton has a very distinct floral bouquet when you visit it the first time. Is it pollution? Is it the mountains? Who knows? So first things first. So for those who maybe don't know you as much as well as I do, can you just tell us a little bit about your research interests and what you're working on?
Sure. Yeah. So I am a historian of childhood, youth, and consumer culture. And so most of my research is really interested in questions about how age matters, mainly in the way we consume things, the way things are advertised to us, and the way that kids' interactions with markets have been perceived by adults. So a lot of the research that I do looks at how adults talk about kids, worry about kids, analyze kids, decide who kids are and who kids aren't, and all of those things. And so that's been the main focus of my work so far, in my PhD thesis and my published work, and hopefully at some point a book. We can talk about that. And I teach at VIU. I teach mainly Canadian history, but also childhood education, business, consumer culture, labor, and public history.
And so why do you think it's so important to understand the place or role of the younger generations in history? And I mean, I might be totally off base here since this is really not my topic, but I get a sense that the youth is often forgotten in our history. I mean, are they?
They wouldn't like to be, I guess. There's a couple of reasons I think that it's important. And one I think is that, I don't know, the way that I was trained as a historian was to listen a little more carefully for the voices of people who may be kind of undervalued or ignored, or not in a position of power where their voices are being listened to. So I think what I like about the history of childhood is that when you start to read it, what's already been published, and when you look into the sources, you realize that their experiences can tell us just as much, and sometimes more or something different, about a particular historical period or a particular event. And because of those power dynamics, because children are often in not in positions of power in their lives, their perspective is usually different from other people's. So I think the one very striking example would be what we do know about the experience of students in residential schools, for example. It just adds a completely different dimension to the archival records, many of which are not accessible to historians. So in that case, they really tell the story in a way that other sources don't. And I do think also that, and this goes right back to the beginning of the history of childhood studies, and I think of Neil Sutherland and his early work, that young people as a group often make change even if they don't mean to, because the society around them changes to accommodate them, right? So whether it's a reform of the justice system and looking at how young people should be treated within it, or whether it's government benefits and the baby boom and all the changes that it brought, it kind of can tell us the way that a society treats its children or defines childhood can, I think, tell us something about that society more broadly. And then also, I think, so many of the really important things that happen to us in childhood shape our later experiences. So, if we think about right now and the experiences of children around the world in lockdown, and try to imagine how that will shape their future lives. I think the same can be said for the children of the Depression or of the Second World War, of those different historical moments, how it shaped their later lives. And you asked if they were forgotten. I almost forgot that part of the question. I don't think they are. At least, I mean, I'm very privileged, I think, to be part of a group of people doing the history of childhood and youth, and they're very prolific, and so they've demonstrated over and over again that their children's voices, children's experiences can be recovered in the way that in a similar way to other historical actors. So I think there's a lot of really great work out there that shows that. One of the pieces I just finished reading that I really enjoyed was Erin Million's article in the Journal of the Canadian Historical Society, looking at the movement of young country-born young people, leaving the colonial territories and going to Upper Canada or to Britain for their education. And some of them obviously succeeded in the colonial context, and some of them actually died. So she's examining these different experiences that they had, and it's a really great article that I recommend. So that's just an example of the really great work that's being done in the field, I think.
And so, I mean, if we can come back to right now, the present day. So obviously the youth is often at the forefront of progress, right? Like, and right now, I mean, we're seeing this like all over the planet as we speak. Generation Z is it Z or Z? I never know. You're American, your own sister Canadian. So Generation
Exactly.
Z is really leading the charge against inequality, climate change, racism, sexism, and I mean, personally speaking, it's unbelievably inspiring. It gives me great hope for the future. So, knowing, like the youth of the past, is there anything that today's youth could learn about the activism of past generations of youth?
Yeah, well, I think it's a really great question. And I think probably like you and like a lot of other historians, I'm often really wary about drawing direct lessons from the past. Like, you should do it this way. but I do think that it would be, I mean, I think that young activists today could get a lot of inspiration from reading about young activists in the past, and just to feel a sense of perhaps common struggle, and potentially in terms of tactics as well. But I think more importantly, just understanding how their forebears did things. But also what strikes me is the way that often these struggles and calls for justice are something that happened in the past and they're happening again. So that notion that we're in a moment right now that's very active, but that can't be a flash in the pan, right? That this is an ongoing struggle, and to kind of hopefully take some inspiration from that. That could be a kind of dispiriting thought, but the idea that change takes a long time and we don't always know the significance of what we're doing right now for a while down the road. So I think another really good lesson maybe, or something they could take from the past is to be able to practice self-compassion, because I think there's a lot of it's really hard work. Like, I have so much admiration for the young people across the United States right now and Canada, and the climate change activists who were a little bit more active in the fall, and people like countless young people who don't get a lot of play in the press in different countries, who are advocating for migrant workers and who are advocating for education and access to sexual health and all these things, and to know that they are doing their best, even if they don't see the change that they're hoping for right away. That's kind of that's like my mothering. That's my mothering side. You're doing such a great job. Don't be discouraged. But I do think it's a really great indication of, for me, it's interesting because throughout the 20th century, age has come to matter in a lot of really important ways. We have a lot of legal definitions of age, a lot of social constructions of age, and we often hear, like, you're too young to do that, you're too old to do that, that's not appropriate for someone your age. And I think what youth activists show us is that when it comes to demanding justice and equal rights, the age shouldn't matter, and it doesn't. That it's really the power of their will to do something, right? And yet at the same time, their age does matter, because when the students at Parkland School, after the shooting there, launched a national campaign and mobilized people were so impressed, right? Adults are often, in a kind of patronizing way, impressed by what young people are able to do. And, oh, isn't this great? You're going to do such great things when you grow up. And then young people are kind of like, well, we're doing great things already, and won't you help us to do these great things? So Greta Thunberg sees a lot of that, I'm sure, right? Like, oh, you're just a young person, like, wait until you're older. Or, isn't it so great? You're so precocious. You're so, gifted. And hopefully that can motivate older people to join them. But it can also have the opposite effect, I think. So, yeah. It's an exciting, well, it's not exciting, but it's really interesting the times we're living in.
I've always been a big fan of your work, ever since our time at the University of Ottawa. And your 2014 article in Histoire sociale, social history, Eden Goes to School is especially good, and I mean, so good that I used it in my Canadian history class. So look forward to, I know we all hate, like, when people bring up this the dissertation question, but can we look forward to a book in the near future?
Well, the short answer to that question is that is the plan. I don't know how you define nearish future. Which is to say that currently my only printed copy of my PhD thesis is sitting right underneath this laptop, holding it up. But it's been promoted from the bottom of the filing cabinet in my office, where it resided for the first few years of my time at BIU. And every time I opened that drawer, it would rise like a specter of my hopes and dreams, and scold me for not paying more attention to it. So it's kind of like a third child, actually. Pay attention to me. So yes, the plan is to turn it in. And one of the reasons why I haven't, because I've done some publishing since I came to VIU, and they've been kind of smaller or newer projects or smaller projects. I haven't drawn anything else from my dissertation except for that Histoire Sociale article from 2014, which I hope in a revised state will also be a part of the finished book. Yes. So in order to do that, I have actually, I'm going to be on leave this coming year from teaching. Yes. So I hadn't anticipated a pandemic in planning for that. So we'll see how that changes the schedule in terms of research trips, which I probably, if I'm listening to my committee from many years ago, don't need to take. I probably have enough material. But you know, the lure of just one more trip to the archives is difficult to resist.
Yeah.
So I probably don't need to do that. I had hoped to go to the University of Lethbridge. The Institute for Child and Youth Studies there has a writing fellowship, so that might still be possible. It's only one province away, but yeah, we'll see. But that is the plan, is to get the manuscript together and to get it rolling a little faster than it has been for the past few years.
Yeah, I mean, I can sympathize with you. I mean, as you know, I think it happens to the majority of PhDs, right? You get tired of, you finish your dissertation, you're kind of
done.
You're done to it.
It is hard to get back to it. I think, I'm hoping, and I've been told that some people really benefit from the break. Maybe not such a long break, but that it can be helpful. I'm definitely not going to have any difficulty killing my darlings. They're not my darlings anymore. They're just words that I wrote a long time ago, and so I think it'll be easier in that sense to transform it into something that someone will publish. I am excited about it. There's been a lot of recent publications in consumer culture and in history of childhood and youth. I just finished reading, I feel kind of embarrassed to say that I just finished reading it because it didn't come out recently, but Linda Mahood's book about hitchhiking is a couple years, maybe it's 2018. Anyway, not that long ago. And I'm reading, I don't know if you've read this, but Joel Béliveau's book about the spirit of 68. It's about Acadian students in the New Left. And it was just translated.
Yeah, I mean,
so I'm a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, as I joke a lot about, my knowledge of Canada really is limited to it ends in 1850 basically.
Yeah.
I don't really know what happens after. I know at some point in Canada, there's confederation or something.
At some point, all these colonies got together. It's all good. It's okay. Oh, and this arrived yesterday in the mail, which I'm very excited about. It's Danitza Belize's new book, Purchasing Power. So I've got a nice big long reading list.
Yeah.
And that's I'm looking forward to having more time to think. Ideally.
You're now a professor at VIU, so after your time at the Wilson Institute, you accepted a position at Vancouver Island. So have you liked it so far? Any highlights?
Highlights, yeah. VIU is a great place. And I think it's a great place. I love my job. I still love my job. Um, I, we have a small department, and that's has been a change for me, but also I think really a strength of of our institution, or of our department, that it is, we have 7 people um, teaching. We teach a lot. Um, we teach contractually 4 classes a term. So 4 and 4 is our load. It's often a little bit less for various reasons, but the flip side of that is that we have really small classes. So my classes are capped at 34 students, lower level, upper level, 34 students. Which is great. So one of the things that I really enjoy about being at a small university, primarily undergraduate university, is the way that you see a lot of students. You see them again and again in different classes, which for the most part is a really good thing.
Yeah.
There's always, the few people who maybe you don't mesh with,
Yeah.
but often they, in a history degree, there aren't a lot of mandatory courses in a history degree. So if you really don't, if you really have a personality clash with someone, they usually find their way to another professor. But I've been able to, develop really good ongoing mentoring relationships with some of the students, which I really like. And it's also a really, compared to other institutions I've been at, it's a very casual place. So it's very kind of BC in that way, maybe even more so than UVic and UBC. So the students, a lot of faculty just go by their first names, and we're all pretty casual and very friendly. So one of the great things about being in a small department is that the way that our space is organized, on the same floor as me, I have history colleagues, but also media studies, creative writing and journalism professors, as well as English profs. So, and we all kind of intermingle. And so there's a lot of space for kind of the development of collaborative projects, potentially, of collaborative teaching, co-teaching, and interdisciplinary conversations, right? Just sharing pedagogical approaches, talking about your research. So I really appreciate that. That's definitely been a highlight for me.
So I can hear my kids yelling again and fighting, so I'm assuming that means that we're almost done. But so one last question before we go. So what's next for you? Can we maybe look forward to seeing you next year at the CHA in Alberta?
I would love to go to the sea. I was planning to be there last week, this year, and we're having our business meeting today for the histories of children and youth group. So yeah, I'd love to be in Edmonton. It's Edmonton, right? It is Edmonton. I actually have family in Sherwood Park, so it won't be difficult to convince my partner, who grew up in Sherwood Park, and our kids to go and visit their very cool U of A student cousin. And I'm hoping to be there. I think it's going to be extra sweet, I think, to see people after 2 years, well, 3 years in my case, because I wasn't there last year. But when you're forced to not go, it seems to be different than when you just choose not to go because you can't quite make it fit into the schedule. But as for new projects, one of my colleagues at VIU, Dr. Cheryl Krasnick-Warsh, who's published quite a bit on women's health and children's health as well. We've got a project that we're working on together on children's television and popular culture during the Cold War. And it's Canadian, but also American. partly because so much of our popular culture is American in origin. So right now we're writing a paper about a little known television show called Captain Midnite. And it is available on YouTube if you want to check it out. But it's basically a Korean War veteran aviator who's now a private citizen, aka kind of like Bruce Wayne, similar to Bruce Wayne, who fights crime, but more often he fights evil men everywhere who often come from outside the country with nefarious intentions to undermine the American government. So it's very Cold War. It's a very Cold War children's program. It's adventure. It has actual atomic test footage in the program. Just think, imagine your kids sitting down and watching a program, and it's like, oh yeah, there's an atomic bomb test. So it's a really Cold War. It's a Cold War project, and we're hoping to put it into an edited collection. Sometime in the next little while of I think the title we're working with is Atomic Childhoods. So thinking about children's culture in the context of potential imminent nuclear annihilation. That's what we're working on.
That's an awesome title. All right, well, thanks for talking to me. I when was the last time we spoke? Like 2014? Something like that. It's been a while.
It's been a while. Aside from like the odd email back and forth.
Yeah, it's like nothing, like it's just like going, like nothing's changed. So
exactly. It's like stepping back in time and
yeah, exactly. Well, thanks again for doing this, and best of luck with the rest of this pandemic.
Thanks, Max.
And your children, hope they deal well with school, which we're still unsure what's going to happen here. But I know you in BC, your kids are already back in school. So
part-time, yeah. It's kind of reassuring to have that routine reestablished, even though it looks a lot different than it did before. Yeah. But I'm also peppering them with all kinds of questions and nagging them to write down how they're feeling and keep a journal and all this stuff. I'm like, when you're a grown-up, you're going to want to remember what it was like during the great pandemic of 2020. The museum here, the community museum in Nanaimo, is such a great place. It reminds me a lot of the Workers Museum, the Workers Heritage Center in Hamilton, the way they reach out. And anyway, so I've done a couple of projects with them. But they put together a form, and they have so they're collecting COVID-19 stories from the community now, in a kind of ongoing way. So one of our homeschool activities that I offered to the kids to do was to answer the questions and fill out the form about how the pandemic is affecting them. So one of them took me up on it and answered it. So, and it was kind of, for the first time, not just like, oh, mommy, stop talking about the olden days, but was actually thinking about how their lives might fit into future histories, and like people might read this in the future, and then would I be famous? Probably not, but in any case.
We all approach social distancing with pride and gusto. So others, like me, are like cowering in the corner and just wanting to go back to normal. But again, awesome. Thanks for doing this. And
thanks for having me, Max.